Yes, as Ratnavara was giving you sort of the overview, the context of what we're talking about today, and I early this year I came across a sort of a very simple and accessible list, sort of just saying capturing really what he just said. So I'm going to read that list out, and it's basically all the things you need to remember to lead a spiritual life, all the things you need to remember in the course of your life. So it's like what you can bring to mind now to help you now, but also what you might explore over time that will guarantee you growth, will guarantee you spiritual development. So this is the list, and it's from Bhante Sangratchita, this list. So number one, keep up your effort to be mindful and aware. And Ratnaprabha describes that as the path of mindfulness. So keep up your effort to be mindful and aware. Number two, remain in as positive mental state, emotional state as you can. So focus on, okay, how can I be more positive in this moment? So remain as positive mental state as you can. Three, stay in touch all the time with what matters most. Stay in touch all the time with what matters most. And of course, for that, you need to figure out what really matters in life, not not always what we think. So what really matters in life, when everything's stripped away, what's essential importance? Number four, apply that understanding about what matters most in life to every aspect of your life, to your work, to your relationships, to your communication. Apply that understanding to all of the aspects of your life. And number five, do your best to help people. Do your best to help people. And that's what the focus is of today. So yes, the energy of compassion, the spontaneous path is another way of saying, do your best to help people. I quite like do your best to help people, but I think we need the more poetic version as well. So what is compassion? Compassion is a response to suffering. Is a positive way of engaging to suffering with the aim of alleviating that suffering, doing what we can to alleviate that suffering for ourselves or others. So when I say that, I'm just curious as to what comes to mind when I say compassion and the energy of compassion and the spontaneous path. I'm wondering what images are coming to mind for you. So for me, I know in the past, and probably still do, the image that comes to mind or has come to mind in the past has been basically getting out there, doing stuff, getting out there, engaging, how can I help, being really quite busy, finding people in difficulty or difficult situations and actually actively wanting to help. There's definitely some truth in that in terms of the Buddhist perspective, getting out there. So it's not just about being mindful on one's cushion only for oneself and being positive only for oneself. It's actually, okay, what am I going to do with that? If you're the more mindful you are, the more positive you are, the more you can make a difference in the world. So that's kind of what the image can be: actively getting involved, doing things, being supporting others in some way. However, we also know that, and we hear this sometimes, don't we, that you can burn out. You can be so busy doing stuff, trying to help everyone, and then burn out or get exhausted or get resentful. Or after all I've done for you, what about me? All of that. Is that familiar to some of you? Yeah, okay. So you feel like, okay, I really want to help this person. I really want to do what I can, but they're not changing the way I want them to, or they're still acting the way they're still doing that thing I told them not to do. It's not in their interest. And where's the thanks? All of that can be part of trying to be compassionate, trying to actually make a difference in the world. So that picture of compassion is, as I said, there's truth in it, and it's limited. From a Buddhist perspective, that way of being compassionate is a limited perspective. So I hope in the time we've got left that I'm going to share a little bit of what Buddhism says really is the real foundations of compassion, that you don't get exhausted from, you don't get resentful, you don't sort of get burnt out. It's a flowing energy that keeps moving and naturally, spontaneously, and it comes from plenty, doesn't come from effort. So yeah, the goal of Buddhism, as you probably know, is enlightenment. What is enlightenment? It's wisdom and compassion. The two, they're sort of the same sort of wings, if you like. They're twin expressions. If you like, compassion is born from wisdom. Compassion comes from, is the fruit of understanding. It's the fruit of seeing things as they really are. So that's also, I was thinking about this, I don't think when I was growing up, when I heard the word compassion, I didn't think of wisdom. I thought of being kind and selfless, even a bit of a martyr, you know. But Buddhist compassion is born from wisdom, from clarity, from overcoming ignorance. And then compassion is the natural fruit of that, natural expression of that. So in a way, that's kind of capsulated in the story of the Buddha. So you've got the story of Siddhartha, the man who was the seeker. He wanted to find the truth. He wanted to overcome his suffering. He had a wonderful life, privileged life. He had everything he needed. He knew what he was going to do, follow in his father's footsteps. He had a lovely wife and child, everything was going, he was healthy, he was handsome, everything was going well for Siddhartha. Until he sees one day the reality of sickness, and then he sees the reality of old age or changing, of change. He sees the reality of death. And he doesn't just see it intellectually in the way that we might, he actually realizes that is going to happen to him. He is going to have that same experience, and not just him, his wife, his child, his father, they will all go through that experience, and no one has a response to it. When he asks, well, what do you mean? What are we supposed to do then? How are we going to deal with this? Everyone's like, just get on with life. Just get your head down, focus, get on with what you're doing. It's kind of like no one has a real response to the reality of the suffering that's going to come. So he then realizes it's up to him. He goes off on this journey. He goes off on this search, many years, really training his mind. He learns meditation. He makes some mistakes, but helpful mistakes in the end. And finally sits down one day underneath a tree and says, it's ready. I'm ready. I'm ready for the enlightenment experience. It's now or never, basically. He sits down and he has this enlightenment experience. And afterwards, he spends some time just absorbing it. And then he's like, well, what do you do? What do you do if you've attained the goal? He's had all this search, and then he realized, well, what do I do now? And the kind of momentum is outwards. He wants to share it. And it's like whenever we find something in our lives, we think, oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah. We want to share it, don't we? Often we want other people to, hopefully, not always maybe, but hopefully want to share it. We want other people to experience what we've experienced. And it's no different from the Buddha at that point. He recognizes there's a need for this. But then he has a doubt, because he's like, gosh, it's such a revolutionary experience he's had. He's got a whole different level of consciousness, a whole different way of relating to life. He's like, how are people with all our struggles, ordinary people like me, you and me, how are we going to receive that? How are we going to, get our sort of, if you like, look up to experience the truth that he's experienced himself? So, and he has his vision at that point. He has his vision of this pond with these lotuses, and they're all at different stages of growth. So a lotus, the roots of a lotus are in the mud, and it grows up in the water and out into the sunlight. So he sees the stems just below the mud, not yet emerged. Then he sees buds above, just still really closed, and all the different levels of growth he sees, right to the flower that's open into the sun. And he then realized, there's a kind of everyone is seeking growth. Every single person is seeking the light. And then there are those who are ready to receive the full truth as well. But everybody's seeking the light. So those experiments he did as a student child, where you had to put a plant in different conditions. You did remember doing that? And you put it in a cupboard, and even the plant that was in a cupboard, as long as there was a shaft of light coming through, there'd be some movement towards the light. Yeah. And that is us. That's human beings. So he has this vision, and then he knows he's just got to teach. And he does that for the next 45 years of his life. The next 45 years, till the moment he actually breathes his very last breath, he's teaching. His actual death was a teaching. And what you then have in India and all the places that Buddhism spread is this energy of compassion. You have, it's almost like he's released this energy, and many other people become enlightened. They then connect with this energy of compassion. They share their understanding, and it then spreads, and it creates societal and spiritual transformation in all those countries that it went to. And there's some great stories of what the energy of compassion sort of must have been like. So some of my favourites are, some of you have heard of this one, the mother who her child dies, and she's so bereft with grief. She's so wanted this child, and it dies, and she's sort of really neglected and not well looked after in the family, and she only has status because she has this son. And suddenly when the son dies, she just feels she's lost everything, and she loses her mind, as it were. She goes mad with grief. She has a major breakdown, and she's carrying the child on her hip, dead. And everyone's avoiding her. Everyone's scared of that and don't know how to deal with her. Eventually, someone takes pity on her and sends her to the Buddha, and he doesn't. Because she wants medicine for the child. She says, give me medicine for the child. And he doesn't say, all things are impermanent, your child's dead, get used to it, he doesn't do that. He basically sends her off on a journey where she has to find out the truth for herself. And it's a gradual learning, it's a gradual experience that she has, where by the end of this journey, she realizes it for herself. It's a very compassionate way of teaching. She realizes, oh gosh, she comes to one day and realizes the child's no longer alive. She buries the child and goes back to the Buddha and says, the work has been done. He asks her to go to a house where to collect a mustard seed where no one has ever died. So every house she goes to, someone says, I'll give you a mustard seed. And she goes, oh, make sure no one has died here, have they? And they're like, well, of course, my uncle, my aunt. And then she really has that experience for herself. Another story that I like is the one of Nidhi, who's been cast out by society. He's a manual scavenger, which means that his job is to collect the waste really from the latrines and take it to the edge of the village. And they still have people that do that kind of work now in India. And so he's shunned by everybody, and no one wants to be around him, and he feels himself that his presence will pollute others. So he hears the Buddha's coming and just realizes he's got to get away. He can't be around because, if he can't be anywhere near the Buddha because he'll be abused. So he tries to hide, but the Buddha goes in pursuit of him. And he tells him he realizes he's got a lot of faith, and he's actually open to the sun. He's ready to learn. And the Buddha accepts him in his community, and it changes. He becomes a teacher of kings. So that's an incredible shift there. And another story where the Buddha had his haters. So there was one of his cousins was trying to kill him, and the cousin sets off an elephant that's enraged, kind of lost its mind, and a wild elephant that's enraged, and this elephant charges towards the Buddha, but the Buddha is full of the energy of compassion, and he's not afraid. There's no fear for the Buddha. So I can't imagine that. I can't imagine having this thing rolling towards you, and you're just standing there. So that's what happens. This elephant is racing towards the Buddha, but the Buddha has no fear. He's full of this compassion, this wisdom. He sees and understands what's happening with the elephant. He sees and understands the whole experience of this elephant. And so that is what's communicated, a kind of understanding. And so as the elephant comes towards the Buddha, all his rage, because he connects with the Buddha. And that's the thing, if you know someone really can see you and really understand you, you have a whole different way of communicating, yeah? And that can be as small as, I don't know, going to the doctor or something, and the doctor, you telling the doctor your story, and the doctor going, oh, and actually explaining things, you'd say, yes, you know. So having somebody that really understands, really sees us, helps open us up, helps us let go of all our defenses and all our resistances. And that's what happens to the elephant. And so you've got the wonderful end of the story where the elephant, as he's moving towards the Buddha just slows down. And you've got this thing where the Buddha is just caressing the elephant's head and trunk, and they're like friends. So those are some of the stories of the energy of compassion. The Buddhist history is full of those stories. And then as more and more people became enlightened, they have their experiences as well. And in a way, I think this energy of compassion, it's still here. This building is here because of that. You know, I'm here because of that. I remember picking up my very first Buddhist book and reading about the way to alleviate suffering. And I had some big questions that I wanted to find out the answers to, and read the book, and I thought, wow, you know, it described what we call the Noble Eightfold Path, which is like the path where you actually transform every aspect of your life. And I was like, wow, is that really possible? Are people doing this now, like this day and age? So you had the kind of teachings, and the teachings have been passed down, and the practices have been passed down. But really, that's not enough. You also need the kind of spirit to be passed down as well. So what I realized when I went to the Buddhist center was that, oh, well, people are fairly friendly. And they seem relaxed. And they seem interested, and there's some energy in the room, and that was enough for me to get going. And then at some point, I met it's actually one of my teacher's teachers. I say I met him. He sort of met me, as it were. He came towards me, and I felt the energy of compassion. And it was that point that I thought, I'm a Buddhist. Before that, I was like, oh, I don't know. Do I like these people? I don't know. You know, let's see. You know, and then experienced the energy of this teacher, and I thought, I am a Buddhist and I need to follow this path. So the energy of compassion is still communicating itself in some way or other, you know, we're still accessing the teachings, so we have that opportunity to transform and change. So let's see, where am I going to go in the time we have? Yeah, so in a way, it's kind of how then, you know, if compassion is metta, loving kindness, friendliness that meets suffering, and with the aim of alleviating or transforming or being alongside that person that's suffering. And even if you can't change a situation, because sometimes we can't change situations, being alongside somebody, connecting with them, feeling with them makes a difference. If you feel like somebody is sharing your experience in some way, it can help. Yeah. So there's different ways of responding. There's different ways to be compassionate. There's not one singular way. It's a very creative thing, if you like. But there's a poem that I want to read that I'm going to unpack, because I feel that gives us the sort of essence of what this energy of compassion is. And this poem comes from one of Bhante Sangwacha's friends called Lama Govinda. And he is describing in this poem a Buddha called Amitabha. And Amitabha was not a historical figure. What you have in the Buddhist tradition are people that have meditated very, very deeply, and through their meditation experiences have sort of experienced, if you like, visions, or they've seen manifestations of equality. And that's really important because, you can think that, I probably thought this as well, that the whole Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and these figures that you see are a bit strange. But how I think of it now is that actually we need something sort of tangible, concrete to express equality. If I just say compassion, it can be abstract. It's a concept, it's an idea. You have to have an experience of it or some representation of it for you to go, oh, that's what it is. So if I say Martin Luther King, then in a way I immediately think of compassion. Someone who had a huge effect and had this energy that touched people, that moved people into action, and that actually did transform the world that he was in at that time. So we need something tangible in which to navigate, to navigate what we understand by compassion, but also to move towards. So for me, one of these figures, this figure that Lama Govinda writes his poem about, is one of those figures. It's a figure called Amitabha. It's the Buddha of infinite light. And people have meditated and brought this figure to mind, and including Bhante. He's had a sort of his own experience of this figure. And it's a red Buddha. And the Buddha is holding, it's got two different aspects to it. It's red and it's sitting in meditation posture. So one hand is here in meditation, but the other one in Bhante's vision is holding up a flower. And it's already, like, in a way you could see that as the two aspects. So the meditation is real compassion comes from wisdom. Real compassion comes from reflection, from contemplation, comes from understanding and seeing things as they are. And for that, you need space. You need the space to reflect, to understand your experiences that you're having, and to make sense of the experiences that you're having. It's not just action and doing stuff. It has to come from an awareness. So that's what the meditation hand does. But then the flower says, well, the more you understand, the more you can do, the more you can communicate, the more you can express. And that's what the flower stands for. The red is energy, it's emotion. It's also red, we're attracted to red, aren't we? It's an attractive color. We move towards red often. But this Buddha is sitting on a red lotus above the sea, above the stillness of the sea. So the depth of the sea, the calm of the sea, the tranquility of the sea. And then behind that is a great setting sun. So you have the warmth of the setting sun. So already this Buddha is saying, you can relax. You can be still. Your knowledge and awareness can come from the depths, and it can have a soothing, nourishing, embracing effect on you, on others. So that's already a bit of a different flavor of compassion. This warmth, this embracing energy, and a soothing energy. And so I'm going to read some lines of the poem, and then I'll unpack it. And it starts with, he says, the Buddha of infinite light. That's what he's known as. And it starts with, who is meditated upon while facing the setting sun, when the day's work is accomplished and the mind is at peace. So in a way, I see that as you've been mindful, you try to be positive, you try to focus on what matters, and then you come to a space where, okay, I need to understand more deeply my experience so I can respond appropriately to others and to all the things that life throws at us, all the things that is involved in life. And then it says this, Amitabha, thou who liveth within my heart, awaken me to the immensity of thy spirit, to the experience of thy living presence. So thou who liveth within my heart, awaken me to the immensity of thy spirit, to the experience of thy living presence. And that really, the liveth within my heart says we, even if we don't experience it, we have the ability to be compassionate within us. It's intrinsic to our nature. But it's covered over. It's covered over by all our conditioning, by all our views, by our busyness. All of those things cover over this capacity for compassion. But it's here. It's part of who we are. We just got to create the conditions for it to come into being. And when we do, it says, awaken me to the immensity of thy spirit. And that for me is like, and compassion is bigger than we can ever know. We have an idea of what compassion is, being kind, being nice, but it's much more than that. It is like the kind of the force that met the elephant. You know, that elephant, that had a huge force to it, and the Buddha's compassion was bigger than that. So it could meet it. So whatever we think of compassion is probably limited. And it's kind of saying to us, let go of the limits of what we think is possible. More is possible. There's more to us than we realize. There's more to this thing called compassion than we realize as well. So let's release the limits of our thinking and respond to that and allow it to be big. So yes, awaken me to the immensity of thy spirit, to the experience of thy living presence. It's a force, it's an energy. You feel it, you feel its effects. And when there's a compassionate energy, in the same way when there's a friendly energy and a warm energy, you move towards it. It has an effect, yeah? And it's opposite, isn't it? We know what it feels like when it's cold and something is, unfriendly. So in a way, compassion is saying it's gonna have an effect when it's present. It's a living force that's here right now in our world and in our experience as well. Deliver me from the bonds of desire, from the slavery of small aims, from the delusion of narrow egohood. So this is really key to what Buddhists mean by compassion, because it's saying, in a way, the reason that we're not connecting with it all the time, the reason why it's covered over is because we spend most of our time wanting things. We spend most of our time going, I want that, I don't want that, and don't know how to deal with that. So we're just constantly craving, we're constantly looking for satisfaction, constantly looking for something that's going to fill us up, that's going to nourish us, it's going to make us feel that life's worth something. We're constantly looking for that, but often not looking for it in a place that really gives it to us. And we know this from going on our phones and scrolling. We're looking for something, looking for the thing that's going to go, oh, that was great, but we keep scrolling because we don't quite find it. And life is a bit like that as well. So we basically saying, let go of the smaller aims. Again, think a bit bigger, connect with what really matters and make time for that in your life, because that is going to be what really nourishes you. And this narrow egohood is basically recognizing that we see ourselves as quite separate, that we're on this little journey by ourselves. We've got to protect ourselves and quite separate from other people. And then we can get quite defended as well. And it's saying that is not really the truth of things. We are so much more connected to others. In fact, we're deeply interconnected. And if only we saw it, we would naturally want to move towards others. We'd naturally feel a kinship with others. And even just like, how we're here. How are we here? We're here as a result of so many conditions, parents, food, the air we breathe. We would not exist without all these conditions coming into being. We're so much more. We're not separate, basically. Life is so much more mysterious than that. So when we see that, we naturally feel like connected and in solidarity with other people. So we can let go, it says, of narrow egohood. And then it says, enlighten me with the light of thy wisdom, suffuse me with the incandescence of thy love, which includes and embraces the darkness. So these are the lines that I particularly, when I read these for the first time, I thought, oh, yes. Enlighten me with the light of thy wisdom. In a way, if you let go of the kind of small things and the kind of constant craving that doesn't really give you what you're looking for, there's space. If you let go even a little bit, there's more space. Let go a bit more, there's a bit more space. And when there's a bit more space, something else comes in. And that's where you have to sort of trust, really, that if you can let go of our various addictions and our various negativities and habits that we just, we've been doing it for a long time. We know what effect that has. Let go of that. The more we let go, the more comes in. So this is where it says, suffuse me with the incandescence of thy love. It's kind of like the love is there, compassion is there. We've got to create a space within ourselves for it to come in. And it's really important, this bit, which includes and embraces the darkness. It's like, actually, we do suffer. Life isn't easy. There are ups and downs. And one of the things that we often do is avoid that. We think, oh, I want nice things to happen. I want pleasurable experiences. And then we push away our difficult experiences. And it's saying, actually, we bring it all here. Yeah. We can't actually transform our suffering without meeting it. We have to embrace it. But it's saying you can embrace it with this light and this love. And then it says, like the light, and it gives some images now, like the light that surrounds the dark core of the flame, like the love of a mother that surrounds a growing life in the darkness of her womb, like the earth protecting the tender germ of the seed. So it's saying that it's not an easy path, and that we need conditions that can support our growth. And that's all those images are pointing to that. The mother, the growing earth, or the mother is going, you're going to have awkward moments. You're going to have challenging moments. But there's something that is supporting the growth. Yeah. So keep going. And it goes, let me be the seed of thy living light. Give me the strength to burst the sheath of selfhood. And like the seed that dies in order to be reborn, let me fearlessly go through the portals of death. So that I may awaken to the greater life. So you keep practicing, you keep meditating, you keep creating the space, change will happen. And change can actually sometimes feel challenging too, because we can feel like, oh, I know who I am if I'm doing these things. So when we change, we're sort of stepping out and we're willing to explore a bigger sense of ourselves, and that can feel challenging. It can feel a bit like death sometimes. We talk about our old self, don't we? And it's kind of like we've moved from our old self. And then it ends with, so that I may awaken to the greater life, the all-embracing life of thy love, the all-embracing love of thy wisdom. So that's Lama Govinda. And I think it talks about the various stages of what cultivating compassion is. And I say this particular poem most days, and it sort of orientates me into a richer, more beautiful, and gives me access to some courage as well, to keep going and to keep putting myself in the conditions where change can happen. And that is a little bit of the energy of compassion. And maybe we'll get some questions about the spontaneous path. I didn't cover that so much, but it gives you a little taste of compassion. So thank you. So we got a few minutes for questions, if you've got any questions or comments.
Yeah, I mainly when I'm in a bad mood, I walk around kind of. I notice that I'm more angry at people, and also seeing kind of the suffering in the world. You know, going into the tube and everyone's in there. And it makes me in some ways angry about it. And then I wonder how you meet that with compassion, or in the wider scale of this kind of suffering happening in the world.
Yeah. I mean, living in London is a practice, isn't it? If you're going to be compassionate, you know, like you just go out the street and you're going to see things and feel a bit assaulted by various things, or feel things that think, oh, why is that happening? You know, so absolutely, and it's a practice, definitely. And I think the first thing is you go back to the be mindful. Being mindful, being positive. But for me, I often think I've got to recognize the effect of things in me. So if I see something that actually does upset me, it's really important to just acknowledge that and not, again, try and distract myself from it, push it away. It's like that is happening now. And can I then bring metta to that? Yeah. Can I bring metta to the experience I'm having right now? And then that's where the teachings come in as well. So in a way, part of the letting go of, the kind of negative habits that we have, and the kind of limited thinking, is actually understanding the teachings much more as well. You go, in a way, it's sort of like, there is suffering. That's what one of the first teachings the Buddha said, there is suffering. We're not going to escape from it. But our question is, how can we respond to it? So when I'm in that situation, I'm like, how can I respond to the pain, the discomfort I'm feeling now, in a way that helps me move, expand, rather than close down? And that's metta practice, metta bhavana practice. Yeah.
Yeah. One aspect of compassion that people seem to forget sometimes is being able to receive. I've known some very compassionate people, but if you try to give them something back, they push it away.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that's not necessarily compassion then, is it? Because the thing about the compassion, it's in a way what they're doing, and we can all have that as well as a practice. How can we receive kindness from others? It's a really good practice. It's not about just what we're doing for others, it's receiving it too. But when we're doing that, we definitely are separate from others. So you're pushing that away. If we find ourselves pushing something away, we're pushing others away, we're pushing generosity away, and that sort of shows that we're feeling quite separate and sort of like defensive in a certain way, yeah? So in a sense, that wouldn't be what we really understand by compassion, because compassion comes from the recognition that we're deeply interconnected, interdependent. That's really what, that's when you've got real compassion, there's not a me over here, you over here. It's like, we're all in this together. What can I do to help? And it's spontaneous in that sense.
Yeah, I have a practice that when people do things for me, I respond with gratitude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it is a practice to receive. Yeah. And that's a metta, goes back to the self metta again, because you're worthy of it. You're worthy. We're all worthy of love. We're all worthy of receiving kindness. So we've got to learn that about ourselves as well. That's part of the practice. Yeah.
Well, it's not really a question, but when you were talking about the fact that you can't have compassion without wisdom, I think for me that was a really light bulb kind of moment as well, in terms of sometimes wanting to help someone or thinking you're helping someone, but maybe doing it with judgment or not really understanding what they need, or helping them in the way that you think that they need to help, rather than really listening to them or understanding.
And it can be really practical, can't it? Because it's like, when somebody's telling you a story about the experience they go through, if you then go, well, I think what you need to do is this, it can shut you down, right? So what you want when you're telling somebody about a difficult experience is just to feel they're connected with you and they're really hearing it and they're prepared to really open to that. And that is much more compassionate, if you like, empathic than, what you need to do is this. Because there is a tendency we have to want to fix things, to sort things out. And partly that comes from our discomfort with the pain. And that's why, walking down the street and, seeing something that's really painful, difficult, part of what the pain is like, I can't fix that. I don't want to see it. I don't want that to be the case. And I can't just fix it. I used to work with refugees and migrants, and, I couldn't fix it. So I had to find other ways to be with the situation, and then think, what's really going to be helpful for this person in this situation now? And it was always different. You couldn't do a formulaic thing. Yeah.
On this point of clarity and compassion, I think, so in terms of one's own personal practice, do you do both the mindfulness of breath and compassion together, or every day, or
we always suggest to alternate mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana practice, alternate them, so you get the balance of awareness and clarity and integration, and then working with your emotional mental states. And what metta is as well is an orientation. You're not saying every time you sit on the cushion and do the metta practice, you're going to feel great. You're going to feel happy. You're creating the conditions for well-being and positivity and positive expansive states. But what you're really doing is orientating your mind towards friendliness and openness. You're sowing the seeds. Every time you sit, you're sowing the seeds so that your orientation is less and less one of pushing others away or defensiveness or over dependency, and more of one of friendliness and openness. But you're sowing the seeds every time you sit. You can't always expect to experience the fruits of it when you sit. It will take place when the time is right. You're creating the conditions for it. Like when we plant a seed or a plant, it needs all these conditions to grow, and we are the same. So alternate the practices, yeah.